have Mark Hart, who is the state organizer for the Florida Media Coalition, and we also have William March, the political writer for the Tampa Tribune. You saw Wayne Garcia, didn't you?
Absolutely.
He gave you the best
What
kudos.
a crazy compliment,
He said
man.
you are one of the best political writers that he's ever had the pleasure of knowing and reading columns from.
That's not what he said.
Deserved.
No, I'm kidding. It was close to that. That was pretty cool, man.
I feel kind of flattered.
Well,
Wayne bills me for that.
Welcome
He
to
probably sent you an
owe
invoice.
him for that, right? Welcome to the show. Mark, we didn't get to touch on last week what we wanted to talk to you about last week, so we're glad you're back. But what is the MFC stance on the recent news about Media General and the buyouts and all? What do you guys think of that?
Well, we're watching it closely because we're in favor of reversal of the FCC decision of last year, allowing for cross-owned newspapers and TV stations in the same market in 26 markets nationwide.
You want that to go back to not having that opportunity to be able to do that.
Yes, we do. We want to reverse.
See dismantled, and that's it. No more coming up, and it.
Full
took
Congress
over
will
too much.
consider it by June. The Bush administration is likely to veto it, but we've got a new administration incoming.
All right, so you got some hope there, huh?
So summarize some of the events that we don't know, like because we had trouble putting our arms around it and kind of understanding.
It's kind of a big
everything
thing.
that's going on. Can you
know?
just in 30 seconds explain what the heck is going on?
Well, historically, there was a prohibition on newspapers and TV stations being co-owned in the same market, and the FCC relaxed those rules. Our concern is on a number of levels, one of which is co-owned newspapers and TV stations in the same market tend to reduce local news coverage by other stations there by up to 25%. The operations are so big that the other TV stations find they can't compete in the news hole, so they do more sports, weather, and entertainment programming. Also, even though they're very big, co-owned newspapers and TV stations don't necessarily produce more news combined than they would have separately.
They're just
Put
more
it together
venues,
and have a
right.
stronger foothold on their viewpoints of the news.
Kind of.
I think so. Wouldn't you say?
Well, what I think about this is that, to begin with, if you're looking for people who don't like chain ownership of media, probably the best place to find them is in the newsrooms of chain-owned newspapers. You won't hear more scorn or disdain for media chain executives anywhere than you will hear it in a chain-owned newspaper newsroom.
No kidding.
But so then why work there? Why not go to a
job.
non-chain?
There aren't many
Left.
non-chain-owned newspapers left. There are far more reporters than there are openings in non-chain-owned newspapers.
Huh.
And the main reason I want to talk about this is not to disagree with Mark, but to point out one strong dramatic exception to what he's saying, which for the most part I think is true. And that one strong dramatic exception is exactly where we live in the Tampa Bay area, where we have two competing mainstream morning daily newspapers. And the fact of that undercuts every otherwise valid argument that he's making for this particular area.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's simply that the number of places in the country where you have two newspapers competing head-to-head in the same market used to be huge. It used to be every significant sized city in the country. Over the last 50 years, it has gradually, steadily, and often rapidly decreased, so there are now fewer than 24 places where that even happens.
Oh, wow.
The place that we're sitting in is unique in that way. There are a lot of results of that. One is, this is one of the few places in the country where you can still put a quarter in a box and buy a newspaper.
Sure.
It's never,
Everywhere else it's a buck.
It's never less than 50 cents anywhere. In most places it is a buck. The same is true of advertising rates, but it also means that you get two different points of view on every local news story. Now what that does is it negates the negative effect that you get from having the newspaper in one town cross-owned with the TV station.
Who are not necessarily developing more news and news stories and digging down in. They're contributing to the same story that they want to put out there.
Well, add to that what you have in this media market is four national network television stations, plus an independent local cable television station, plus two mainstream morning dailies, 2 public, or 1 community-owned and 1 public radio station, 2 public television stations,
Jeez.
a host of community newspapers, a black newspaper, on and on and on. We have a radically fragmented and splintered media market in the Tampa Bay area.
And still not a damn thing on TV to watch, just for the record, with all that crap.
Mark, how do you
mind.
answer that?
Sorry, that was my thing.
Well, I don't fundamentally disagree with a lot Wendy's saying. I too have worked for chain-owned newspapers,
Sure.
the Chicago Tribune and Gannett. Journalists typically aren't crazy about that, but the corporate takeover of America's newspapers dates to the 1980s. And that's when I came to Florida, got into journalism, and what's changed since then is publicly traded newspaper chains.
Right.
So, insofar as the media market is concerned, the dynamics here are unique. This is arguably the
Sure.
most competitive market in the state.
Oh,
but
sure.
could Media General possibly being on sort of the chopping block right now, on the sales, up on the block to sell, right?
Correct.
Is it possible that, FLA could go somewhere else, the Trib could go somewhere else, they hang on to TBO, and now we don't have that issue in our market anymore? They changed Congress, can't ever get it back in our market, and the St. Times and the Tampa Tribune live happily in this market?
I'm afraid that's extrently unlikely. If you look at the number of places where there are 2 independently owned, head-to-head competing newspapers,
doesn't happen.
It no longer, not only are there no new ones coming into existence, all the old ones are going out of existence. The choice is not between a newspaper and a television station in Tampa that are co-owned and a newspaper and a television station that are not co-owned. The choice is between what we have now and a television station with no newspaper.
Huh.
Now that would mean a single...
We have now and a television station with no newspaper.
Right.
That's right. In other words, 1 newspaper in the Tampa Bay area instead of 2. Now when that happens...
Who's going to hold out longer? Private or public?
That's a good question. At this point, right now, if you've been reading the paper, you've seen that both newspapers are cutting staff. Both newspapers are collapsing sections. Both newspapers have drastically reduced the number of reporters they have in Tallahassee, Washington, and et cetera. And again, the choice is not between 2 independent voices or the choice is not between co-ownership or lack of co-ownership. The choice is between a newspaper and no newspaper.
I guess what I'd say to that is I question the business decision to converge the 2 operations at all. We're better off for having 2 newspapers in this market for sure. But this was supposed to be the new trend and the big thing in journalism, and the flagship of convergence and news media operations looks like it's sinking.
We have about 20 seconds left. Is there one last thing that you want to say?
That you can both agree on that you want to say together?
That you're friends.
We talked about this before. Digital technology is changing everything.
It is.
And it's eroding the revenue base of traditional journalism. We're not quite at the point where newspapers are an online medium yet, but it looks like it's moving that way.
Mark, I have to disagree with you. I think that newspapers will never go away. Magazines and bathroom reading material. It's a horrible thing to say, but we'll see. I do want to get you both back again. Mark, I want to get updates of what's going on and how it's going to affect it. And what Media General is doing here has got to definitely affect other markets.
The globe's watching it, I'm sure. And kind of analyzing what's going on.
So we want to get updates from you. So thank you both for coming on tonight. It's great to have you back again.